Hello, Paul. How are you doing today?
Very well, Ash. Thank you so much.
Great stuff. Do you have a favorite quote, something that motivates you, inspires you, you would like to share with our audience today?
Absolutely. I previously worked with a bit of a mentor many years ago, and he once told me that the price of criticism is a better idea. And I really use that in all facets of my life. If something isn't quite right and you want to complain about it, but you don't have an idea as to make it better or to solve the issue, what's the point of complaining? You're just whining into the air. So, think about, how do I make something better if I don't like it?
Mm. Yeah. And we see that every single day, not just in the media houses, in the debates, in the parliament, or even on a table in a pub sitting with some couple of acquaintances, and we're talking about a topic, and people start complaining about things without even thinking that what they could add to solve the problem, which is, unfortunate. But yeah, that's the reality of life, isn't it? Great.
Absolutely.
So, Paul, let's do something different today. Then, let's say you are in a room with full of youngsters, and by youngster, I don't mean like 15, 14 years old. Somebody, it's adults. They're just out of college. They're in a relationship. Either they're in a live-in relationship or some kind of commitment relationship, and they're there because they're facing challenges in their relationships. Right? You've got the mic. You got the stage. What would you say to them in your first minute so that they can stick with you for the rest of the hour?
I think the number one issue that really complicates more relationships than any other is our inability to hear our partners. We listen, but we
Mm,
don't hear them. And what I mean by that is listen to the words that they might say, and we don't spend the time to really understand the underlying meanings and motivations behind them. So when they complain, about, oh, we haven't had enough sex, or you didn't pick up the laundry, or, whatever common complaint that happens in relationships, step back before reacting in either anger or frustration to whatever that complaint is, just as my mantra was earlier. What's really at stake here? How do I make this better? It's not just, okay, I'll go pick that up. It's okay, you're frustrated with something, but this incident, this one event is not the whole cause of it. And trying to understand that is the difficult part. And that's what
mm,
it means to hear your partner. Because to listen is passive, to sit there and take in the words. To hear is to take time to understand and not just respond because there's dead air, but to really take the moment to understand your partner's position and
mm.
to say, it isn't about the socks on the floor. It isn't that we didn't have sex last night. There's something else going on. And these were just the antecedents that caused this conversation, but there was a lot more that led up to this. So let's understand that.
So basically, underneath causes of the exact challenges, so that we can figure out where the actual problem is, and then try to figure out how to fix it. So,
Correct.
so Paul, take us through your journey then. You have helped hundreds, potentially thousands of, individuals in this space. When your journey started, how did you proceeded, or what was the trigger which led you to become an expert in solving in this space, become an expert in this space?
Well, I joined Ashley Madison in 2013, and I had had a long career previous to me joining this company. And this was a very new space for me, not just online dating, but this particular niche of online dating. These
Mm,
were people seeking very specific things under the cover of discretion, which is what at the core Ashley Madison is about, discretion.
mm,
And I could learn the technology, I can learn how the systems worked fairly quickly. But what I really wanted to understand is, who were our users? What was their motivations to joining our site? So one of the first things I did is I spent a lot of time actually talking with our members. And I didn't ask them about, how was our service? How was our site? I wasn't asking about their experience on Ashley Madison. What I was trying to uncover is, why did you join Ashley Madison? What was missing from your primary relationship that led you here? And because that motivation was the most important thing in my mind to understand why our business was, and will be always so successful. Because technology is not the reason you join a dating site. No one really particularly cares about one widget or another. They're nice once you
Mm,
get there, but that's not the reason I joined. I joined because I'm missing something in my life, and I believe that your brand is going to facilitate the solution to that problem. And ours is very unique. And in speaking to hundreds, if not thousands of members over the years, plus you layer on one of the things I actually do really love about my job is I get to work with academics around the world who want to study the true nature of monogamy, non-monogamy, infidelity, and really get to the roots of what motivates people to join a site like ours. And between those two facets, that in-depth understanding of why people cheat has, helped me become somewhat of a subject matter expert over the years. And that's really, the origins of my journey on this path.
mm. Very interesting, because you actually had this opportunity of learning I don't want to say it's psychology, but it might be, but the inside girth of human brain, how they react in different situation when
No,
it
it was
comes to
very much
relation.
the psychology behind it. There
It
was actually one of the
okay.
studies I love to point to.
Mm,
We had a researcher come to us from the University of Missouri, a woman by the name of Dr. Alicia Walker, and she was fascinated as to what were the real causes for why women cheat versus why men cheat. We have ideas around it.
mm,
Culture tells us a lot of things. Hollywood tells us, governments, religion, they inform our opinion on it, and most of them are dead wrong. They have no idea what they're talking about, quite frankly. And
mm,
so Dr. Walker really wanted to dive into this in a more in-depth professional manner. And so she came to us, requested access to our membership. We allowed it. So this was a study that we didn't pay for. This was her own work for her own professional reasons. But it was fascinating because it really flipped the script in terms of how we understand the motivations around cheating. 80% of the women in this study indicated that they were in a sexless or orgasmless marriage. So in
mm,
essence, they were outsourcing their intimate needs to Ashley Madison because they wanted to preserve their marriage. They weren't looking for an exit. They loved, in fact, their partner very much, but their partner was either unable or unwilling to facilitate what they needed from an intimate perspective. And so that was, completely the opposite of what most people would suggest as to why women cheat. And fascinatingly, the male component also was opposite of what most people think. Most people think men are just, very high libido, low morals, low ethics. It turns out that the majority of the men in this study were seeking emotional validation, the desire to be wanted, the desire to be understood, to be heard, to be told that you are needed is a very, base underlying motivation that we often ascribe to the female. But in fact, it
mm.
was the primary motivation for the majority of men who had joined Ashley Madison through this study. So I find that sort of insight fascinating. And, I tell people this, and at first glance, a lot of people will push back on it. But when they really sit down and think about it, it makes sense. We live in a world where aesthetic-based compliments are the norm for males to give to females. Oh, you look really pretty on that dress. Oh, you got your hair done.
Mm,
Women, if you tell your man he looks really nice in a particular shirt, watch what happens. That shirt's going to come into the rotation a lot more because we're not used to getting that type of compliment. We're told to be stoic, to suppress our feelings, not to fall, into the trap of needing that external validation. And it turns out we all need it. Women are
mm,
getting it because that's how culture has dictated, the norms of heterosexual relationships. Men compliment women, but women
mm.
often stop complimenting their male partners over the years. And in doing so, they're eroding the trust and the desire that their partner wants from them and creating, cracks in the foundations of their relationship.
That is very interesting, because I've never thought about the way we appreciate each other when it comes to male and female, because I, in my brain, always thought that it's my duty to be complimenting my partner whenever she's looking good, and even if she's not, I make sure that I don't hurt saying anything bad. We have a rule in our family. Well, the rule is, if she cannot fix that thing within 5 minutes, then I should not point it out. That's the rule,
It's a good
right?
rule.
Yeah.
But
S- s-
and there's nothing wrong with men paying compliments. In fact, that's a very
mm,
good thing, clearly.
mm,
But women need to see that there's value in them doing the same thing. But as I give men, counsel as well, you need to listen and really hear your partner when they tell you what they need in the bedroom, because that part is what's missing for them. And it's often because men are, uneducated as it relates to female anatomy, female sexual enjoyment, how they achieve orgasm. I think less than 20% of women will achieve an orgasm through penis and vagina sex.
Mm.
So if you know that going in, it's not about you, men. It's about what she needs and how she needs it. So you need to listen to her and work with her. And yes, get over your squeamishness and have these hard conversations so that she's having as great of a sexual experience as you think you are.
Interesting. It's okay. Great. I want to talk about it more. I want to uncover all these golden nuggets. But before we go to that part, can you take us through the challenge you faced during your tenure with Madison days, Ashley Madison days? What kind of numbers you were dealing with there? What was the percentage across there with different demographies, and what you figured out with those numbers around the challenges which you had to solve at that point of time?
Well, when we have about 20,000 people who join our site every single day.
Mm,
And, those are huge numbers when you look across the span of the world in terms of seeking out an affair partner, going to a place like Ashley Madison with the tagline that is life is short, have an affair.
mm,
Clearly, we're servicing a need in society, but understanding what that is a lot more nuanced and complicated, because not all affairs are the same. There's a lot of differences in terms of how people manifest their intimate needs through Ashley Madison. We have things like compassionate affairs. We have don't ask, don't tell affairs. We have, pure libido affairs. All the different facets happen. And so understanding the nuance of each of our members to ensure that we're building, the community in a way that addresses each of their concerns. But one of the most, foundational pieces that it took me a while to completely understand, but like I said, I've been there for 12 years now, was that it was the discretion we offer, because people can cheat anywhere. In fact,
mm.
our number one competitor isn't another dating app. It's the office space, because that's where traditionally affairs have occurred more often than not, because you spend more time with your work colleagues than you do with your spouse, particularly in the early years of your career, because the 40-hour work week is a lovely notion, but a lot of us are doing 50, 60 and more
Yeah.
hours a week in the office. And you add on travel and office parties and all these sorts of things. So that's where our competition comes from. So the difference, though, is that we offer a discrete platform with a community of people who are also seeking discretion, because what they're choosing to do is something they don't want others to see, not out of shame necessarily, but it's none of your damn business
Mm.
what I'm doing and whom I'm doing it with. And so each person who's joining Ashley Madison not only covets the discretion that we offer in terms of how the technology works, but also understanding that those who are joining the site equally seek that discretion, meaning that when they meet with somebody and they conduct their affairs, as it were, both are going to act in a fashion that doesn't cause the other to be exposed. And I think that underlying foundational piece was the most informative and the longest piece for me to completely understand, because I wasn't in that space. I wasn't seeking these types of activities. And so to gain the empathy, it took me a while to speak to a lot of our members, to see that connection point to all the different types of reasons you come here, but that unifying point was the discretion.
Interesting. And there's this question comes quite a lot on my different social media platforms, where I try to, uh, first of all, articulate what the young generation means about it, and then try to give them a direction, not necessarily solve it. But when it comes to cheating, there is a lot of gray area. There is some people think that emotional cheating is worse than the physical cheating. Some people think that otherwise, right? While physical cheating or physical affair are often seen as more damaging in our society, emotional affairs can create sort of like a deeper, longer lasting fractures in
Well, I
trust.
think the problem there is, one, starts with the point where you stand at the altar, and I don't care which culture, religion, ethnicity that you are, you stand at your altar and you
Mm,
profess that you'll be faithful to your partner. And we all have the understanding that if I go sleep with somebody else, if I have sex with somebody who's not my spouse, that's cheating. No one disagrees with that sentiment. But after that, it gets complicated because almost nobody sits down with their partner prior to getting married or when they're first married and discusses what is cheating, what is not cheating. Not just emotional versus physical, but the whole gambit. Is it cheating if I masturbate when my partner's not there? Is it cheating if I watch pornography with my partner?
Mm,
There is movements like the Graham Rule, which is a concept that's a part of the evangelical movement that is primary in the United States of America. And this rule states that a married man can never be alone with a woman who is not his wife because
mm,
a woman is so tempting and a man is, clearly incapable of controlling his emotions and his physicality that he is going to obviously have to have that affair. It's a
mm,
ridiculous concept, quite frankly. But my point being is this: what is cheating is defined uniquely to each individual. And if you're not having those discussions in an upfront manner, you're going to very likely, end up in a position where your partner is going to accuse you of cheating, where you're going to go, no, no, I was at a hotel on a business trip. Of course I masturbated while I watched pornography. What's the problem? Isn't that better than going down to the local bar? But if your partner feels that's an act of cheating, then it is fact an act of cheating. And so you need to know this going into a marriage before you stand at that altar. And I don't think our culture, um, you know, gives the confidence to people to have this type of conversation. And people find out the hard way is that the definitions of infidelity vary greatly.
interesting. And when it comes to, okay, let me ask you this question in a way that it could cover a scenario. This question keeps coming back to me in different formats on different platforms. Would you do if you know your partner is cheating on you, but you are in deep love with this partner? You do not want to break the relationship, no matter if you have kids in the relationship or not. It's more about the love you have with this person, right? But you already know this person is cheating. What's the best way to tackle this situation?
Well, I think that scenario is probably a lot more common than people want to believe.
Hmm.
Um, the reality is you have to first look internally and say, maybe why is my partner having an affair? Is there something I'm not providing? And this is not a situation of blaming the quote unquote victim, because I don't think there's a victim in this personally, but understanding the dynamics of how affairs happen is this first step to determining whether or not this is going to be the end of my relationship. Is this an opportunity to expand our relationship? Or is this an opportunity where I have to compromise my beliefs in order to maintain the relationship? And there's a lot of permutations that can fit within that as well. But the
Hmm.
starting point is, why is my partner having an affair? And so you have to determine, do I want to confront my partner? Do I want to say to them, I know you're having an affair? Which is a dicey proposition because the unique nature of how people and why people have affairs, the secrecy alone could be the exciting part for that, and that's in many scenarios. And once that is gone, then maybe the relationship falls apart or maybe that affair falls apart.
Hmm.
Also, you might determine that it is in fact my fault that the affair is happening, in so much that I'm not listening to my partner, not delivering on her or his expectations. I'm not providing to them the things they ask for that are reasonable and that I had previously had, but I no longer can or will. And so what do I want to do about it? Do I want to change my patterns? And so there's no easy answer to that question. It's going to be unique to every single individual. For some, the mere idea of an affair happening within the relationship would be the end of that relationship. And so be it. But you have to ask yourself, what am I willing to give up? So this is really the reason and rationale as to why our site exists and why it's so successful, because I argue that if your partner is happier through their affair and comes back to be a better partner, better spouse, a better mother, husband, father, wife, is that not better than divorce? In a lot of cases, I would argue it is, so long as the partner is unaware of it, what we would call an undiscovered affair. In your scenario, you're talking about someone who discovers. Our whole business is predicated on what we call successful affairs, which are undiscovered affairs. The idea of discretion ensuring that or bettering the odds that you're not going to be discovered. But in the scenario where your partner does discover or knows or believes at least, that's a different scenario. And it's going to be unique to each person. They have to decide, what is my relationship worth? And how far do I want to, allow this scenario to proceed? Because if In some cases, and it's funny, we work with a woman named Dr. Tammy Nelson, and she's a marriage and sex therapist. And she has this idea that some people have what she calls can opener affairs. And they are affairs that are intentionally meant to be discovered by the partner so that they force hard conversations. So I say to
Mm,
my partner, listen, I love you. I love everything about you in our relationship, except there's an aspect of our intimate world that's missing, and I it's very important to me. It previously existed. It's either been taken away or diminished, and I need it back. And my partner refuses, doesn't listen, or doesn't make any actions. I might then choose to take my you know um, activity outside of the marriage with the intention of being caught so that I can show to my partner, I was very serious about this. This is very important to me. And if you're going to be dismissive about my wants and needs, I will seek them else. I'll seek them out elsewhere. And then you have to decide whether this relationship is worth it or not, because this is very important to me. And neither
mm.
person is wrong in that scenario. If the wife doesn't want to do whatever the husband wants, she's well within her right. But is he not also equally within his right? So it's a difficult and sticky situation to be in.
Mm, mm. Very interesting. And I want to point out the study you mentioned. I was looking into your website and I found out that there was a very good study you put out there on your blog post around the good wife study, right? Would you be able to share some more details about it? I'm very eager to learn more about it, like why women are being judged more harshly compared to men when it comes to adultery in our society.
That's the whole history of the world. I
Mm,
mean, think about it. We literally have books like The Scarlet Letter where women were brandished with red letter A on their vestments to show them as being lesser than males. First we have to understand that monogamy was not a creation of love and affection. It was a vehicle for property rights, hereditary, for royals to ensure that the offspring of the women were in fact the male's actual heirs. Love and intimacy, as it relates to monogamy and relationships, came along much, much, much later as basically a marketing vehicle to sell monogamy because it's not a natural concept. Monogamy doesn't really exist in abundance in the natural world. We're one of the few creatures that propose it, at least. Though the reality is, adultery shows up in every religion, ethnicity, geography, economic level. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are. You are all prone to it. And so it's very, very rare naturally. And so that fundamental point tells us that while we try to, or certain structures in our world, like governments and religions, try to force monogamy as the default and the only option, we're now in a world increasingly where women are saying, I think I would like to explore elsewhere. I think I'd like to choose a different path, and I want my partner to come along with me, but I understand you may not be willing to.
interesting. And there was also this mention around like when you guys did this study, you figured out like there were like around 2,000 females on the website who like agreed to do the survey. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Or is
yeah.
it
We,
more
we
than that?
we constantly have feedback from our members. Thousands of them every week are giving us data and insights around their reasons and rationales.
Mm,
Because you have to understand when you come to a site like Ashley Madison, regardless if you're looking for a affair, if you're in a non-monogamous relationship, the discretion that you're seeking is there because you don't want the world to know about it. But in doing this, you still want to explain to the world. So they have an outlet. It's almost a catharsis to explain to the world why they're here through the lens of anonymity, through our surveys and our data, so that they can tell the world that your views on monogamy may work for you, but it doesn't work for everybody. And we ask, or at least me as a company, we're asking you to have an open mind to understand the rationales before you make the judgment. So don't just use your pre-existing understanding of infidelity or non-monogamy as a judgment. Dive into the real data, into the anecdotes, to the people who are seeking these activities before you make your judgment. So we constantly get feedback from our members, both good and bad, in terms of what they're looking for, what they've experienced, and what they would do differently if they known what they know now before they got married. So the reason we do our studies with our members is not to say to the world everybody should have an affair, monogamy doesn't work. No, it's that monogamy works for some, but doesn't work for everybody. And that
Mm,
doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. But understanding the nuances and the differences is important. And so we're trying to shed a light on a very secretive world, one that is misunderstood and is chastised, and people are afraid to delve into it. And so, we're being the brave soldiers and going to places where others won't go and standing up on behalf of, well, we've had more than 90 million people join our site since we launched. So clearly, we're servicing a need. And in doing so, we're going to share that information in the world so that our members can, feel a little bit more validated about their choices.
got it. Got it. You mentioned, Paul, around 20,000 people used to join the platform every day, right? Do you guys like have an idea like how many of them in terms of percentage were single men and how many were them of them are like in a committed relationship, or all of them were actually looking for something exciting out of the relationship? What was
So,
the
it's
ratio?
interesting because, as I've said a bunch of times, clearly,
Yeah.
we're in the business of discretion. So we try to
Yeah.
collect as little personal data on our
Right.
members as possible, simply because if we don't need it to operate our site, we don't want it. So you don't have
Mm,
to give us a ton of information. That said, we do track certain statistics. And one of the ones that I find fascinating, because this is a fairly new phenomenon, because obviously we've been in business since 2001. And our tagline is life is short, have an affair. So it's very clearly who we're marketing to,
mm,
people over the years seeking extramarital affairs. But over the past 6 or 7 years, we've been asking our membership, are they there in a disclosed non-monogamous relationship, meaning their partner is aware, if not participating in their actions, or a non-disclosed affair or non-disclosed non-monogamy. And at least 20% of our members have identified recently that they're in a disclosed non-monogamous relationship, meaning their partner's
mm,
aware, possibly approving, possibly participating in their actions, meaning their partner has told them that they're seeking out activities and connections with people outside of the marriage. And I find that fascinating because that is a major shift for us as a business, but also a major shift in the culture. And a lot of people, when I say this, say, well, why don't they just do this in the open? And the answer to
mm,
that is fairly simple. If you've started to build up a career and you have kids, and you have family, and you have a fantastic social circle, and you're interested in non-monogamy, but you're not sure how far you're going to take it, and what exact nature it's going to exist, you don't want your colleagues to know that you're sleeping with somebody else outside of your marriage. You don't want your sister to know. You don't want your kids to know. You don't want your neighbors to know. And so the discretion we offer gives people the opportunity to explore, dip their toe into the space before they jump in fully without the whole world necessarily knowing about it, because they've come to the conclusion that they don't have any particular shame or guilt about the choices they made, but they also feel like maybe the rest of the world, doesn't need to know about my dating habits. It's none of their damn business. We've
mm,
lived the past 20 plus years via social media in a very open and transparent way. And I think society is fatigued from that. I think, particularly online daters are saying, I don't want every aspect of my desires and needs as my dating profile puts them out there exposed to the world in the way that it is. And I think some of the more traditional dating sites are, heading into some headwinds on that front. And you look at their numbers and they're struggling. And I think that's the core reason. And they can build every little new widget or tool on the site to sort of, address this. But I don't think that's the solution, simply because people don't want to have a public profile, or a lot of people don't want a public profile that details all their desires and intimate needs for anybody in the world to look at. I come into the office and, my female colleague sees I'm into X, Y, and Z on my dating profile. That's a weird conversation to have. That's an
mm,
odd sort of structure, but we've become
mm.
used to it. But I think we're now getting fatigued from it and people are looking for alternatives. And I think it's part of the reason why we're continuing to see such success.
Indeed, indeed. And that reminds me of an incident. So, couple of weeks back, me and my partner, we were, we go on vacations now and then in the country itself, just to be outside of our place. And then in the hotel, we were having breakfast, and on the big telly, in the breakfast area, there was BBC. On that, this BBC anchor was interviewing somebody who is a businessman, and he started a website called secondwife.com. And that was so intriguing that we started watching it. What we have learned is that this particular gentleman has gained more than 500,000 users on the website. So there are more than 500,000 people, and UK is not a big country, right? It's 74 million approximately, less than that, right? Out of that, if you have 500,000 people registered on this website, and the fascinating stat he was sharing on BBC was 68% users of his website was females. And we were like, what's going on here? Like, first of all, secondwife.com looks like a fishy domain for some reason. And then B, there's more women than men on that website. Looking for what? And that like created so much curiosity between both of us. And then we went back and then we looked into the website, and it's just I think this is where the society is moving now.
Well, that's a very particular niche website that is primarily targeted at the Muslim community, where depending on which, you know, part of Islam that you follow, there's certain elements where bigamy or polygamy are endorsed, if not approved, and so that's the concept for that. As to whether or not I can't speak to his assertions in terms of how many people, women or men, are on the site. So that's a little outside of my scope. I can only tell you about the nature of our membership, and it's actually interesting because people question the veracity of all elements of our business because they don't want us to be successful. They don't like our business, and I get why. We actually hired the big auditing firm Ernst & Young to review our membership a few years back because people had so many questions about it, and I could tell you the numbers. But I said, you know what? Why don't I hire Ernst & Young? And they'll tell you the numbers because they're a little bit more, you're going to trust them more than me. And I get why. I'm biased. I work for the company. And we have a public report. Anybody can download it. It's on our website. And when they looked at our numbers, the ratio of active women to active paid men was 1.13 active women for every one active paid man, meaning there was more active women on the site. And that speaks to women's desire and their agency over their own intimate needs. And I think that's a function of a world where women are closer to equality from a legal, economic standpoint than they were for generations. I wouldn't say we're completely equal, but we're a hell of a lot closer than we were 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. And women are taking control of their lives and saying to their partners, listen, if you're not capable, willing, able to do what I need, I'm not going to leave you because I love all the other facets of our life, but I'm going to find it elsewhere because the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life is a long time to live an unsatisfied sex life. And so women are choosing to control and manifest a different intimate life than their previous generations were able to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you because that particular website was more towards a particular culture. So that's why
very, very niche.
It can't be related to everyone else. Great. So let's move to the next part of our episode then, Paul. I have heard that in history of human being, we never had a concept of marriage. The concept of marriage or monogamy actually came after religion. So the religion was introduced to human first, and then after the religion was introduced, then the concept of marriage was introduced. Before that, there was nothing like marriage. It was more about if there is an alpha male who can take care of the woman, because those days the males used to go out and like get food or shelter, whatever, and they used to protect women, and the primary jobs or primary trades women had was like raising kids, raising family, etc. And slowly it moved to the point where we got religion introduced into our society, and then after the religion was introduced, we got marriages and monogamy, etc. In your opinion, now once in a while I see this news popping up, Independent, Thomson Reuters, BBC, all these big media houses, that people started, not just because of financial reason, but people started going towards the polygamy. People started having more than one wife, even though if they're not Muslims, even though they're not, they don't follow any religion. It's more around the benefits they have around it. So, for example, you can live 3 people in the same house and you can share the rent or mortgage. You will use the same things, right? Do you think going forward, marriage concept of marriage or this legal relationship is going to be obsolete?
Well, there's a bunch of things there. So let's just start with marriage predates most of modern religion. The earliest marriages that we can find in the recorded history go all the way back to Mesopotamia. So the concept of marriage actually comes before most religions. So it's not the other way around, as you were
Okay.
sort of suggesting. Um, but you know that was, more often than not a form of control, rooted in a lot of misogyny, that where women often were deemed as property versus a partnership. And so the legal aspects of marriage came later to encode how I can control my wife and what she is and what she isn't. And
Hmm.
again, that was a lot of misogyny that came from, and the religion sort of backed a lot of that up over time, depending on which religion you ascribe yourself to. But in terms of your question, will marriage become obsolete? No, marriage is never going to become obsolete. The desire for us to be pair bond with somebody else is innately hardwired into our DNA. The difference is, how we manifest that. So you have to separate the legal functions of marriage with the emotional functions of pair bonding. Because marriage as a concept was a legal concept more than anything else to control hereditary, control property. It was about legal rights, about how we function within, particularly now in a modern world where, there's lots of assets and money. So when a marriage dissolves, how do we split that? So that's the legal function of marriage more than anything else.
Hmm.
But the emotional connection, the pair bonding that we seek, that's never going away. How it changes is going to be, as you sort of talked about, is it monogamy? Is it non-monogamy? Or is it a wave where we have different times where, where we're in the early years and we're raising our children, we are truly monogamous because we don't have the time, energy, or effort to add or seek out others beyond the function of our day-to-day lives. But as the kids get older, as our careers progress and we have more options because we have economic choice, then suddenly, is it unrealistic to then look at, okay, maybe the nature of our relationship will change? And I'll go back again to Dr. Tammy Nelson. In her work, she often prescribes to her clients this concept of a 5-year monogamy contract that is renewable. And in every 5 years, you sit down and renegotiate the nature of your relationship. And it's not a means to sort of say, okay, now I get to sleep with somebody else. Yay, me. It's more, what we needed and wanted within our relationship at age 30 is going to change by the time I get to age 50. But if you wait
Hmm.
that long to have those conversations, a lot of difficult things are going to be swept under the rug and emotions are going to be suppressed. So you need to express it on a more regular basis. Ideally, I would say it shouldn't wait 5 years even. You should constantly be having these types of conversations. But I appreciate what Dr. Tammy Nelson is suggesting here is some sort of consistent, vehicle that allows us to acknowledge that we have changed. Our needs have changed. Our identities have changed. Our desires change in all sorts of fashions. And if we don't discuss them, one, if both of us are going to be left very, very upset, disappointed, and frustrated, and not in a place where we're loving each other. And so having these conversations is not a means to break down the nature of your relationship. It's in fact a way to bolster your relationship to ensure that you're each have a place where you can, have the conversations, express your desires, and negotiate, in essence, how do we want to move forward versus waiting
Hmm.
20 years and then suddenly saying, you know what, I really don't like you as a person. My needs haven't been met for 10 years. And I'm leaving you. And then the other part is like, I have no idea. Like, how would I have known that? Well, because you didn't listen, you didn't have the
Hmm.
conversations, and you didn't ask. And she didn't tell you, or he didn't tell you. So this is the thing that people fail to understand. Your marriage might start at the moment you say I do, but the work is never ending, and that's not a bad thing.
Hmm.
Having the conversations, discussing each other's desires, and again, not just on an intimate nature. It could be as simple as, I'm not a morning person. I love the fact that you get up at 5 a.m. and you want to go for a hike, but for the love of God, let me sleep. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, that's spot on. And apologies, you're absolutely right. Like, institution of marriage appeared way before the development of organized religion. I think I think I misplaced it with religion. I think it was societal hordes like kingships and things like that came first before marriages, and then way after
And
marriages
quite
there was
likely,
a
because as I said
yeah.
before, monogamy as a construct, the legal binding of marriage was not an aspect of love or intimacy or affection.
Mm,
It was simply a matter of property rights. So if you, as you
yeah.
said, if you're a king, you want to ensure your heir, your firstborn son, is in fact your son if you're passing the title of king on to him upon your death. You don't
Mm,
want your wife sleeping with somebody else, or they didn't, and, having a completely different bloodline. That was the
yeah.
whole concept at that point in time. Obviously, we've progressed significantly since then, but that's the true origins of monogamy. It was property rights. It was to ensure that the next king was in fact the son of the existing king.
Indeed, indeed. Great. So, Paul, as you know, we have limited time and we also have one more section to go on our episode, which is the quickfire round. But before we go into that round, I want to ask you something personal. So, I want to know, like, throughout your journey and experience, there must have been valuable lessons learned when it comes to relationships and, trying to resolve these conflicts in the relationships. If you don't mind sharing, could you reflect on your experiences and tell us about one mistake or a setback that you encountered along the way that you now consider not a regret but a lessons learned, and additionally what advice would you give our listeners based on this experience?
Are you talking about my personal relationship life or my job?
um I think I wanted to learn about your personal experiences, but I'm open to hear both.
Okay, well, I mean, I think I fall into the same guise as most people. And as I talked about, we you get married and you don't have the conversations about um desire, intimacy, and all those other functions. You fall into the trap of happily ever after. You say I do and you just go along. And so that was a huge learning curve for me.
Hmm.
I was married in my 20s. And I would suggest people, marriage is beautiful, and I'm a traditional monogamist. I loved all the trappings of that world, but I fell victim to the same sort of issues that a lot of people did. I didn't have those conversations. I didn't dive into beyond listening to the words. I didn't hear my partner at times, and I think one of the interesting, uh, upsides of working for Ashley Madison is that I'm a better person now in terms of how I manage my relationships, because I understand that how we come to our points of frustrations and when somebody expresses them, it isn't necessarily that one individual thing that's made them upset. It's a collection of things that are tied to that. And this one moment is when they've chosen to express it, but it's not specifically or uniquely only about that. And so
Mm,
don't respond to the individual event, respond to the words and the underlying motivations to your partner. And that's the aspect of hearing versus listening.
mm, mm. No, that's really a golden nugget for our listeners, because currently with the modern relationship challenges, it's not just about sharing your mobile phone password. It's not just about having the access to your private details. It's more about understanding what your partner requires or needs in the relationship, and obviously your own needs too. So let's move to our quickfire round then. We have 6 quickfire questions. At any stage, if you think you don't want to answer the question, you can give me a skip and then I can move to the next question. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Great. Number 1, what are the top 3 relationship rules to be successful in a relationship in 2025?
I think respect, active listening or hearing, and patience.
Respect, active listening, and patience. Got it. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Well, I mean, personally, I think The Old Man and the Sea is my favorite book of all time because it is a
Mm,
contemplation on our place in life and understanding, what drives our motivations and our connection to this world as we progress and age in life. And, now that I'm a slightly older person, I think there's a lot more salient points in that book than some people have come to understand.
great. Thank you for that. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful relationship?
When both partners believe that that their partner is in fact the right one for them.
When both partners think that their partner is in fact right. Yeah, that's yeah.
Not
Exactly.
just that I
Yeah.
want her, not just that
Mm,
I desire, not just that I think she's loving, but she's the right person for me.
mm,
Because as we age, things change, but the person doesn't change. What's core to us never changes over the course of our lives. I believe this fundamentally. Our behaviors might change. There's certain things we can change, but who we are at our core doesn't change. So for me to look across the table and say to that individual, "You are my person," I believe it fundamentally, and for her to speak it back to me, that I think is the foundation of a true relationship.
indeed. Indeed. What's your favorite personal relationship hack?
I don't think there are any hacks to relationships. I think it's a lot of work. I think it's a lot of effort. I think it's a lot of intention. And I
Mm,
think, if you read whatever magazine and there's the top 10 hacks to,
yeah.
ensuring your partner likes you, you're going to fail
Mm,
because there's no
mm.
hacks to it. Because everybody's different. Everybody needs something different. So there's no hacks. It's effort.
Supper. Okay. So yeah, i- the more efforts you put, the more understanding you have, the better you get. Great. What's a what's one secret weapon to keep your physical intimacy intact in relationship?
Communication. Simple as
Mm,
that. The act of, w- the act of sex, of lovemaking is starts long before you ever enter the bedroom. Your partner not only needs to desire you, they need to desire you in that moment and to feel that they're trusted, that they're understood, and that they're safe, regardless of the nature of your intimate acts. And that falls on both sides of the equation. And so communicating with your partner on a regular basis, and again, not just about your intimate needs and desires, but about all aspects of life. When
mm,
you break down the barriers that often are in relationships and can communicate in a way that you're completely vulnerable, and show to your partner that you're trusting them with all aspects of who you are and all aspects of your life, that partner is going to hopefully see that and reciprocate, and that will be how you can continue to have a great intimate life on a go forward basis.
okay. And the last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Um, I think the only thing interesting about me is, and I reference this to people sometimes on occasion, that I'm born on the worst day of the year. I'm born on April Fool's Day, which is a ongoing and running joke amongst my social circle, which I enjoy thoroughly. My father always has a good time needling me about that.
Mm.
And so I don't know if that's necessarily interesting to the rest of the world, but I do find that comical on occasion. So I'll give you that one.
Cheers. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story and spreading the wings for our young people to understand how the relationship, the girth of the relationship works. What are the not hack, but subtle understandings we should have in our relationship to improve it. If people wanna get in touch with you, people have question, what's the best way to connect with you?
So if you log on to ashleymadison.com, there's a number of ways to contact us, and all those comments and questions, if they're directed at me through the various inquiries that we have on the webpage, they'll get up to me and I'll respond accordingly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing through your services. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on Relationship Lab podcast.
Appreciate it, Ash. You have a great day.